I have a message for our military. Be ready.
Behind the scenes in the war on terror, another, far more clandestine war was being fought.
في بداية 2005 انتقلت إلى القاعدة.
We were authorized to use lethal force against al-Qaeda.
In this secret war, both sides would make mistakes. Mistakes that would prove fatal. With exclusive testimony from both sides, this is the story of that war.
Everything changed. Nothing will ever be the same.
نين 11 واقعا چې کله وشوه نو مونږ ته پته و چې دا به کله کېږي نو مونږ په 9/11 خوشحالي ملاو کړې وه او مونږ د الله شکر ادا کړو چې د یو غټ ملک یو غټ معیشت هغې ته یو غټه دچکه ورسېده.
Al-Qaeda may well have celebrated on 9/11. Inside the United States' intelligence community, the reaction was entirely different. Shock.
What do we do? Meaning we, because we are the unit, we are the squad that's supposed to stop this.
This is what we were paid to do. We were paid to stop this from happening. And not only did it happen, but it happened on American soil, and it killed 3,000 people.
And that feeling of anger, of loss, was overwhelming.
Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
Beyond the anger and the rhetoric, one thing was very clear.
This can never happen again, and we have to be the ones to ensure that it doesn't.
6 days after 9/11, George Bush signed a unique presidential finding granting unprecedented powers to the CIA.
It removed many of the restraints that previously had been there in terms of going after al-Qaeda as an organization.
Legal authority to kill the al-Qaeda leadership, and that's exactly what we set out to do.
For the United States, the gloves were coming off.
I can hear you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The question was how to find the perpetrators.
It's uniquely difficult to hunt a terrorist group. You're looking for a handful of individuals. You're looking for weapons that are very small. The whole nature of the intelligence target changes.
The answer for the CIA was to focus on the unique nature of the attacks themselves. Cell phones, satellite phones, the internet. On September the 11th, al-Qaeda had hijacked the instruments of globalization and turned them against their inventors. If the United States was to respond effectively, it would have to infiltrate the terrorists' main strength, their use of communications technology.
You're always looking for vulnerabilities in an organization to see if you can get to their leadership. For them to run the organization, they've got to talk to each other. How do they do it, and how do we get in?
The CIA had had a degree of success monitoring al-Qaeda's communications in the years prior to 9/11.
In 93, in 94, 95, al-Qaeda, including bin Laden, was very much on a learning curve. They were new to this, so they used communications devices perhaps less carefully than they should have.
It became apparent to us that he represented the kind of direct threat to us that other terrorist groups might not have.
In November 1996, the US National Security Agency received a tip. Bin Laden was using a new satellite telephone. The NSA traced the phone's number to its ultimate destination, Kandahar, Afghanistan.
It was very helpful in targeting, or at least locating, different cells of al-Qaeda around the world. But he was very careful about what he said on it.
So careful that US intelligence was to remain in the dark regarding plans for bin Laden's most ambitious attack yet. On August the 7th, 1998, al-Qaeda struck US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Hundreds were killed, thousands injured. For the NSA, there was another crucial casualty, its access to al-Qaeda.
The fact that we were following Osama bin Laden because he was using a certain type of telephone, made it into the press as a result of a leak. And guess what happened? Osama bin Laden changed his behavior.
Phone went dead. Phone went dead. That was the singular most stupid thing for anybody to do or say, to talk about that.
Al-Qaeda had learned an important lesson. It now started instructing its operatives how to stop the Americans from monitoring their calls.
A telephone can be a fighter's most dangerous weapon, but used incorrectly, it can get you killed.
And from then on, the communications of al-Qaeda was much more difficult to collect.
Never reveal your true name. Always use your code name.
But for the CIA, there was an unexpected boon. 2 days after the bombing, Kenyan authorities picked up a suspect in Nairobi.
Daoud Rashid al-Ali was an operative, a suicide bomber that didn't die, who basically chickened out and ran.
Confronted by the FBI, al-Awali immediately caved in and answered one key question.
What'd you do that day? After the bomb, what'd you do? Did you call anybody? Oh yeah, I called this number. What's the number?
The NSA traced al-Awali's number to Sana'a, Yemen, and a long-time al-Qaeda suspect, Ahmed al-Hada. Hada was the gatekeeper for al-Qaeda's communication system. His house was the switchboard.
It's like terrorists calling Central. It's your central hub of communications. It's calling home, calling base.
US intelligence immediately tapped the house's phone lines and discovered two unusually frequent callers. The first was a young Palestinian, Abu Zubaydah.
Abu Zubaydah was a very important person, not a fighter or a bomber, but someone who was running logistical affairs for several training camps in Afghanistan.
The second caller was a more mysterious character, known only as Mukhtar.
We had no idea what Mukhtar was. Use of code names makes the trail go a little astray, makes investigation that much more difficult.
The caller's codename was itself a clue. Mukhtar, the brain in Arabic, was the head of al-Qaeda's operational planning unit. 2 years later, US intelligence's failure to identify or locate him was to have apocalyptic consequences.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible.
Punishing those responsible was to prove easier said than done. The CIA knew that their main target was in Afghanistan, but had no idea where. His Afghan hosts, the Taliban, now found themselves in the firing line.
Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of al-Qaeda who hide in your land.
It was through Pakistan that we were trying to resolve this issue of Osama bin Laden being in Afghanistan. We were dealing with Mullah Umar, and we were telling him to hand over or to send him out of the area.
If there is no evidence and proof given to us that we will not be ready to give Osama bin Laden without any proof.
With the likelihood of a deal with the Taliban diminishing, America now went firmly on a war footing.
Pumped up, ready to get it on.
In secret, the CIA explored one last option for peace, contacting the number 2 in the Taliban leadership, Mullah Osmani.
I was trying to make it very clear to Mullah Osmani that the Americans were going to come, and that whatever else might happen, that this was going to be very bad for the Taliban movement.
The CIA made Osmani an extraordinary offer.
If Mullah Omar will not do what is required to save the country, it's up to you. I basically talked him through the elements of a coup.
But Osmani wasn't buying it. And on October the 7th, time finally ran out.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
We used about 110 strike aircraft, including about 90 tactical aircraft launched from sea-based platforms.
In Jalalabad, the response to the onset of hostilities was immediate. The al-Qaeda convoy moved southwest out of Jalalabad towards the border with Pakistan and the mountains of Tora Bora.
We think we know in general where bin Laden and some of his senior leadership are hiding. We think that's in this so-called Tora Bora area.
But getting him was going to prove harder than anyone expected. Bin Laden was not new to Tora Bora. In the 1980s, he and the Afghan Mujahideen had fought the Soviets there. The Tora Bora Mountains were not ideal terrain for the Americans to operate in.
These are very forbidding peaks. The passes through them are typically at a minimum 12,000 feet to 18,000 feet. Very, very difficult terrain indeed.
And al-Qaeda held the high ground. US aircraft bombed the mountains relentlessly.
There is a psychological effect of having ammunition of 15,000 pounds of explosive capability that's brought into a very narrowly defined area. The reverberation effect that goes up in those caves should have some kind of negative effect. The other...
But here, the US faced a dilemma. The Pentagon, afraid of getting bogged down in Afghanistan, refused to deploy large numbers of US troops on the ground. Most of the fighting in Tora Bora would have to be done by someone else. Afghans. To Pentagon chiefs, Afghan ex-Mujahideen were the perfect choice to hunt bin Laden. Not only were they battle-hardened fighters, they knew the terrain inside out. From the outset, the CIA thought this was a serious mistake. In their view, Afghan warlords were less than professional. Some were highly untrustworthy.
One of them turned out to be someone bin Laden had fought alongside of during the war against the Soviets. They're not going to go after bin Laden. They're not going to kill bin Laden. They'll take our money. They'll shoot up some bullets. They're not going to destroy somebody they regard as a hero.
The Pentagon's senior commander disagreed.
We like the arrangements that we have with the opposition commanders with whom we have been working. And so we will intend, at this point, to continue to work with these opposition leaders.
America had a secret weapon.
Good evening.
Pakistan. Immediately after 9/11, the United States had requested assistance from Pakistan's President Musharraf, who had agreed to help with the war on terror. The US now asked its new friend to help at Tora Bora.
We were tasked to trace the al-Qaeda terrorists and stop their entry into Pakistan.
Pakistan military moved up to positions high up in the mountains, and the hope was that these units would be able to capture any fighters who came through.
But covering hundreds of miles of the world's most treacherous border at high altitude was a formidable task.
USSR, with their resources, and they were unlimited resources, they could not seal this border.
You can't put people on the whole mountains. For that, you need armies of 2-3 countries, because you just can't plug every hole.
Worse, rumors soon began to circulate that the Afghan warlords were taking bribes to allow al-Qaeda fighters to escape.
This country, has a history built on bartering, and the allegiances can be bought, and so we suspect that that has in fact been happening.
As time went by, the Pentagon realized that its hold on the warlords' allegiance was temporary, and the time was running out.
Once it went on for a day, and then 2 days, and then 3 days, and then a week, and then 10 days, I think with every passing day, we were pretty sure that they weren't going to be able to get him.
In mid-December, after a month of bombardment, al-Qaeda's senior leaders finally slipped the net. US intelligence assumed they had crossed the border from Tora Bora directly south into Parachinar. Some did. Of those, many were captured. Recent evidence, however, suggests that the organization's senior leadership took a different route on their way into Pakistan, east.
اليوم مثل كسانو ولا شيء ضربة وسلي ورسره وسيم خي ضربة وسلي ورسره ډیرو سره دارا کټمو ډیرو سره ماشینې می نو ډیر بدسي مو بدیلارو با دړو مړو والیو نو موږ ول چې دا چرته بستوره بوډه کې وراغلی زمون کلی خلکو یې لاړ شوی داخل لا پوری بس نو هغه چې لاړو خلک مرا پوری سره په گاډو کې لاړ لاغو مور پسې لاړ.
From the moment they crossed the Kabul River at Lalpur, al-Qaeda and its senior leadership were lost to the Americans.
What is the latest thinking now about where bin Laden might be?
Anybody's guess is the latest thinking.
Entirely predictable, entirely predictable.
They ran into Pakistan, the al-Qaeda and Taliban. They ran into the mountains and cities of Pakistan.
The perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks escaped, and the United States was left to rue the loss of its best opportunity to kill bin Laden yet.
It was a serious setback that bin Laden got across the border at Tora Bora. No question about it.
Bin Laden himself was left to gloat.
كانت جميع قوى الشر العالمي لم تستطع أن تحقق مرادها على ميل مربع فكيف يمكن لهذه القوى الشريرة أن تنتصر على العالم الإسلامي.
What happened to al-Qaeda next is a matter of some speculation. Many fighters simply went home.
Others stayed along the border in Waziristan or the Northwest Frontier Province, where it's very, very difficult, in many cases impossible, for the US to operate, or even for central government Pakistani forces to operate.
Once there, and once establishing themselves there, I think they began to realize that they were, if not completely beyond the reach of the government of Pakistan, that they had a relatively secure safe haven.
Instead of eliminating al-Qaeda, the United States had pushed the organization out of reach. This was to cause serious problems later on. Osama bin Laden had taken on the greatest military force on earth and had survived to tell the tale.
تلك المعركة العظيمة التي انتصر فيها الإيمان على جميع القوى المادية لأهل الشر.
US intelligence was to suffer one final humiliating setback.
We heard the noise and we thought a car had exploded, this man says. When we went to find out what happened, we found a man laying on the ground. We didn't know the reason.
In February 2002, unaware that it was under surveillance by the CIA, Yemeni authorities visited the Hada house. Ahmed al-Hada escaped. His son, Samir, cornered by Yemeni authorities, blew himself up with a hand grenade.
Hada house went down. We kind of lost our ability to monitor what was going on and who was calling.
By the spring of 2002, al-Qaeda was gone, and the CIA's main means of intercepting their communications was gone with them. The future for Osama bin Laden looked good. That was to change. Christmas 2001. Al-Qaeda's senior leadership had fled from Afghanistan into Pakistan, out of the reach of the CIA.
Even in the midst of war, we pray for peace on earth and goodwill to men.
Within months, the agency's access to the organization's communications network, gained by bugging the Hada house in Yemen, would be gone too. Not much room for celebration, and certainly not in Pakistan, where the CIA's trail had gone cold.
We probably had just as good a chance of seeing bin Laden sitting at a cafe somewhere drinking a cup of coffee as we did putting together an operation to go out and catch him.
But bin Laden was not the only possible target. Logistics chief for al-Qaeda's training camps, Abu Zubaydah. All the CIA had to go on was a single passport photograph, from which they created a series of photo-fit images. But in February 2002, intelligence came in that shot him up the targeting list.
One of his main jobs was to get people through Pakistan and out of Pakistan to places where they could find safe haven.
But moving al-Qaeda members meant a lot of phone calls, and US intelligence was listening in.
They are susceptible to detection when they do two things. When they move and when they communicate.
Abu Zubaydah was doing both.
So as he was trying to shepherd those individuals, his vulnerability, if you will, was far greater.
By late February, the CIA had narrowed Abu Zubaydah's location down to the city of Faisalabad and a network of 14 possible safe houses.
Decided that we had to hit all of them at once and capture as many of these people as we possibly could.
I said we've never hit 14 sites simultaneously before. The most we'd ever done was 2.
Undercover officers visited the sites and discovered that one was an empty field with a telegraph pole in it.
The young technical officer climbed the pole, he went through the wires, found the one that we were interested in, followed it down the pole, and then literally followed it down an alley, pointed at a house in the distance and said, "It's that house right there."
The raids commenced at 2 a.m. the next day. Within 45 minutes, the CIA was in possession of a wealth of new intelligence. Bomb makers, jihadis, suicide bombers. And, at last, Abu Zubaydah himself. Not that all had gone entirely according to plan.
He had been shot in the thigh, the groin, and the stomach with an AK-47. He was clearly bleeding to death.
We needed to get him the best medical attention that we possibly could, so that, among other things, he could be appropriately interrogated.
But killing him was not a part of the plan. We had to take him alive.
After 12 hours of emergency surgery, Abu Zubaydah was finally stabilized. He woke to an unpleasant surprise.
I went over to him and I moved his oxygen mask and I said to him, "Shu ismek, what is your name?" And then he said to me in English, "I will not speak to you in God's language." And I said, "That's okay, Abu Zubaydah, we know who you are."
The other day, and hauled in a guy named Abu Zubaydah. He's one of the top operatives, plotting and planning death and destruction on the United States. He's not plotting and planning anymore. He's where he belongs.
Abu Zubaydah was the most significant al-Qaeda member US intelligence had captured since 9/11.
Such an important player as far as knowing who's in the organization. He sent the people to the camps. He had their names. He had everything down about them.
The CIA needed to know what Abu Zubaydah knew. The agency had something special in store for him.
Being a very senior al-Qaeda official who has been intimately involved in a range of activities for the al-Qaeda, there's no question but that having an opportunity to visit with him is helpful. Sometimes I understate for emphasis.
Several CIA officers dressed completely in black with black hoods got off the plane, and then we loaded him on the plane, and I never saw him again.
Where was Abu Zubaydah taken?
Where was Abu Zubaydah taking me after Pakistan? That was someone else's responsibility, and it's not something that I can talk about.
In fact, Abu Zubaydah was flown to Thailand, where his interrogation revealed a key fact: the identity of the mysterious Mukhtar who had been calling the Hadda House in Yemen. Mukhtar, the brain, was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
When Abu Zubaydah identified the picture of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as Mukhtar, then it made sense. So all these fragmented pieces of circumstantial evidence now became evidence.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the top operational planner, the top killer of the al-Qaeda network, the man who masterminded the September the 11th attacks, is no longer a problem to the United States of America.
There was a darker side. On September the 17th, 2001, George Bush had delegated special authorities to the CIA. One of these was the authority to interrogate. From a high-tech signals intelligence war, the CIA now employed less surgical techniques.
Waterboarding is where a prisoner is tied to a board or a gurney. The feet are slightly elevated, and then water is poured on the face from a bladder above. It's very, very painful.
The United States called the technique enhanced interrogation. Others had a different word for it: torture.
Here's a man who knows about additional terrorist acts. Here's a man who trained people to do this. And all this concern about that individual, as opposed to concern about the terrorist acts that that individual has tried to commit, has in fact participated in, who has trained people to do it, and who has knowledge of additional people who are located around the world, it seems to me that I've got it exactly right. I've got first things first, and anything else comes a clear 10th, 11th, or 12th.
Abu Zubaydah's treatments raised more troubling issues. Much of his questioning had nothing to do with al-Qaeda training camps. America had its eyes on a new target.
There are clearly links between Iraq and terrorism, and there are al-Qaeda personnel that have been spotted in Baghdad.
Saddam Hussein is offering now $25,000 per family if they can persuade their youngsters to go out and kill themselves and kill innocent people.
This is a regime that has hostile intent toward the United States.
Is a fact.
It just didn't make any sense at all. We hadn't caught bin Laden, we hadn't caught Zawahiri. We knew that most of these guys were in Pakistan, and here we were moving everybody to focus on Iraq.
Operation Iraqi Freedom commenced on March the 20th, 2003. Initially, the Iraqi response to the invasion was ambivalent.
في البداية لم تكن هناك جماعات مسلحة. في 2003 كان العمل شبه يعني غير منظم. حتى الأمريكيين في البداية لم يصطدموا بالناس، يعني كانوا يتجولون بشكل طبيعي، يحاولون أن يحتكوا بالناس نوعا ما، يحاولوا أن يوجدوا جسور من الثقة بينهم. رؤية الناس في البداية للوجود الأمريكي هو عدم القتال.
Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
President Bush may have thought the war was over, but in reality, it was just beginning.
فعندما أصبح يعني بدأوا قضايا الاعتقالات، بدأوا يهينوا الناس، بدأوا يتجاوزوا الخطوط الحمراء التي يعني عرفها المجتمع العراقي. أراد المجتمع نفسه منا مواقف. في منتصف أو في أواخر 2003 بدأت تظهر جماعات مسلحة، بدأت تنظم نفسها.
There was a far greater threat than Iraqi insurgents. Some in the CIA had seen it coming from the beginning.
You invade Iraq, you will be an infidel country, invading a Muslim country without provocation. What you're doing is giving al-Qaeda the Quranic predicate for justifying a defensive jihad.
فأين الذين يؤثرون الدين على حياة الأنفس والبنين هبوا لنصرة إخوانكم وإغاثتهم في بلاد الرافدين.
Very early in the Iraq war, we began to perceive and communicate that al-Qaeda had infiltrated the country.
في بداية 2005 انتقلت إلى القاعدة. بعض عملياته كانت عمليات ردات فعل يغذيها يعني عمليات لميليشيات أو ممارسات للحكومة.
It's at this point that al-Qaeda's superior knowledge of bomb making began to take hold.
Al-Qaeda bombed and bombed and bombed. The group trapped the United States into fighting an ever more uncontrollable counterinsurgency. Meanwhile, the chaos in Iraq allowed it to resume the kinds of international operations at which it excelled.
You may wonder what you've done to deserve this. You are those who have voted in your government, who in turn have and still continue to this day, continue to oppress our mothers, children, brothers and sisters from the east to the west, in Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq.
The West had miscalculated. Far from neutralizing al-Qaeda, the invasion of Iraq had invigorated it.
It really began a process which bin Laden may never have been able to pull off by himself, and that was moving al-Qaeda from being a man in a group to being a philosophy and a movement. And without our help, without America's help, that may never have happened.
And then, for al-Qaeda, everything went wrong. Al-Askari, one of the holiest sites in Shia Islam in Iraq.
يعني وراء اذان العشاء يعني تراوح بين الثمانية ونص تقريبا للتسعة اطرق الباب سمعنا طرقة باب بانه احد يريد يدخل داخل الامام
فدخلوا الارهابيين من داخل الباب تم اعتقال الشرطه في هذه الغرفه
مسلحين يرتدون زي عسكري لابسين كليتات كتفوا ايادي الشرطه بعدين دخلوا علينا احنا كنا داخل الضريح ولم نعرف انه بين هؤلاء يعني مسلحين.
Guards safely immobilized, the intruders set about their business, destroying one of their own country's most sacred shrines. Al-Qaeda had come to Iraq to fight Americans, but its bombing of the Al-Askari shrine turned the fighting against its own allies. And the man behind it? Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
Zarqawi was an extremely vicious individual. There was literally nothing that he would not do to further his ends. Murder and mayhem were his tools.
Jordanian by birth, al-Zarqawi was one of a new generation of jihadis who gravitated to Iraq to fight the Americans. Once there, he appointed himself head of al-Qaeda in Iraq and set about doing something completely different.
Zarqawi's goal was to drive a wedge between Sunni and Shia elements in Iraq. I think he was attempting to create a massive uprising and essentially a civil war.
Al-Zarqawi laid down his thoughts on Iraq's Shia Muslims in a letter to the senior leadership in Pakistan in 2004.
The Shia are the unsurmountable obstacle, the lurking snake, the crafty and malicious scorpion.
And he went on to explain exactly what he was planning to do about them.
Targeting the Shia's religious, political and military symbols will make them show their rage against the Sunnis. Fighting the Shia is the way to take the nation to battle.
Bombing one of the holiest Shia shrines in Iraq was the perfect way to start that battle. Within 24 hours, Iraq exploded into sectarian violence.
This just led to a paroxysm of violence. And it was after that that you really saw ethnic cleansing taking place.
Al-Zarqawi had brought about the civil war he was seeking all along. But the Jordanian had made a fatal miscalculation. Destroying shrines, killing Iraqis, and especially killing Muslims was not the way to gain recruits in Iraq.
نحن معكم في قتال الأمريكيين لكننا نختلف معكم في هذه القضية لأننا بيننا وبين الشيعة كثير من القواسم المشتركة سواء الوطن الواحد، المستقبل، التاريخ، كثير من الأمور تجمعنا. جلسنا معهم تكلمنا في مسألة قضية الصراع الشيعي. إذا تريدون أن تبقوا في مناطقنا عليكم أن تبقوا وفق الرؤية المصلحية لهذه المناطق وهي الاستهداف الأمريكي.
But al-Zarqawi was in no mood for listening.
لم يوافقوا. حصلت عمليات اختطاف لأشخاص معارضين لهم. قتلوا هؤلاء الأشخاص.
They made this a civil war to the point where the Iraqis said, well, we might not necessarily like the Americans, but we sure as heck don't like a bunch of foreign fighters coming here and killing us.
As the body count spiraled, many who had fought alongside the group now decided to ally themselves with the United States and fought al-Qaeda itself.
ضج المجتمع بعد أن كل الطرق السلمية نفذت من أيدينا فلم يكن لنا إلا ذلك الطريق حتى نعيدهم إلى رشدهم أو يعني نخرجهم من مناطقنا.
Al-Zarqawi's death, the result of a US airstrike in 2006, failed to repair the damage to al-Qaeda's image.
The only strategic threat to al-Qaeda since 9/11 was Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. If we had not killed him, al-Qaeda would have killed him themselves because he came closest to ruining al-Qaeda.
There are lessons to be learned from Iraq's bloody decade. The United States got it wrong, al-Qaeda got it wrong. But the most costly lesson was reserved for Iraqis themselves, the true price of embracing al-Qaeda. Today, Iraqis have had enough of their former guests. The wave of pro-democracy uprisings currently sweeping the Middle East provides further evidence of al-Qaeda's increasing irrelevance.
The Arab Spring is a serious negative for the al-Qaeda organization. They talked about overthrowing corrupt regimes. Now, those corrupt regimes are gone. Their ability to recruit people based on that message is gone.
Images of the protesters show a further disparity with al-Qaeda and its goals. Men and women of different faiths marching together. Calls not for Taliban-led emirates, but liberal democracies. evidence to many that al-Qaeda's appeal may finally have waned.
Yes, al-Qaeda's weakened. Yes, it's back on its heels. The worst may be over, but it, I think, would be a mistake to breathe too easy yet.
In the midst of the protests, one event drove even the Arab Spring from the front pages.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
Since his escape from Tora Bora, bin Laden had been laying low in Pakistan, safely out of reach of the United States. America wanted him, but to get him, it needed Pakistan's assistance. Immediately after September the 11th, 2001, Pakistan had agreed.
I see a dawn of a new era of relationship between Pakistan and the United States.
It was not to prove the era anyone was hoping for. Enraged at the government's deal with the US, indigenous militants Taliban and al-Qaeda united and identified a new target, Pakistan itself.
हमारा स्टाइल गोरिल्ला जंग है और हम गोरिल्ला करते हैं, खुद सेफ रहने की कोशिश करते हैं और दुश्मन को टारगेट करने की कोशिश करते हैं। दुश्मन को हम रोड में भी फंसाते हैं, माइन वगैरह का काम करते हैं, उनसे उनकी गाड़ियाँ उड़ जाती हैं। दूसरा इनके मतलब हम पहाड़ हो या कोई ऐसी चीज़ हम आड़ में रहते हैं, हम ज़्यादा शो नहीं होती दुनिया के दुश्मन के साथ।
To counter the attacks along the Afghan border, Pakistan deployed its military, and the war on terror began to look like a real war.
The death toll mounting by the day. Now, according to official figures, more than 700 fighters have been killed.
Al-Qaeda and the Taliban responded the only way they knew how.
If you put pins on a map showing al-Qaeda attacks in Pakistan, you see them moving gradually over the last 5 years from the border area deep into the interior of the country, to Karachi, to Faisalabad, to Islamabad.
Into this volatile situation, one final ingredient. American Predator drones bombing al-Qaeda suspects inside Pakistan.
The Predators have been quite effective. The obvious downside, however, is that they've generated a tremendous amount of political opposition.
When you use a drone and you fire a missile, it doesn't need any intelligence to know that there will be collateral damage. The collateral damage part is the serious part, because a lot of civilians, a lot of women and children sometimes also get killed.
They've added to the increasing radicalization, if you will, of Pakistan.
The result? Disaffection, destabilization. New recruits for al-Qaeda, more violence. Since 2001, some 30,000 Pakistanis have been killed as a result of the war on terror. Bin Laden may be dead, but in Pakistan, all is far from well. A decade after September the 11th, what have we learned? We know how the United States fought its intelligence war. We know how al-Qaeda fought back. But where the war on terror will lead in the next decade is anyone's guess. The only thing that seems relatively certain, it won't end soon.
دا چې پوره دنیا کې کم مظلوم مسلمانان دي او چې په کوم ځای کې ظالم امریکا، اسرائیل، روس، انډیا چې کم ملکونه هغه د مسلمان خلاف دي، نو د هغې خلاف په مونږه خودکش حملې او خودکش بمباران هغه مونږ تیار کړي دي. نو اوس په هغه کېږي چې کم هغه د 9/11 نه مخکې شوی د روس سره او د 9/11 نه پس د امریکې سره وشو.